I have been warned. This is Richard for the last time. Thank God we can get rid of him now. No. So, this is my last message as leader of the church. I think I've been leading for 19 years last Wednesday. I'm handing over today in about half an hour's time. And I've been part of this church for about 30 years now. And I hope to remain a part of the church for a lot longer. I've not always led well. I have not always been very tactful. I have a long list of available stories to tell you about my tactlessness, but I will limit myself to telling you just one. For the youth who are in with us now, can I just point out that some of these stories are to learn lessons from, not to imitate, please. So when I first joined the church 30 years ago, actually, I had 10 years before I started leading it, my small group leaders were a couple, I will name them, Ian and Sally Anderson. And I went round to their house for a small group meeting. And I saw brown smudges on the wall. And I said the very first thing that came into my head, "Oh, Sally, have you been allowing the children to throw chocolate at the walls?" She said to me, slightly coldly, she replied, "No, those are my stencils." Sorry, Sally. Please forgive me if you do watch this online. She's, And please forgive me, everyone else, to whom I have given the opportunity to take offense. There have been plenty of those. And thank you to the many who have chosen not to take offense. My wife, Helen, says that I have got a lot more tactful over the last 30 years. When I start to preen myself, she adds, from a very low base. These days, I'm more interested in legacy than anything else. Each generation builds on the efforts of the previous one. The youth who are in with us, you will be building on the shoulders of the generation that I'm effectively handing over to. Yeah? Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, uses the whole book of Deuteronomy to recap his leadership. Here, I've just remembered, I was told to stand back because the lighting's better. Sorry. And he uses what he says in the book of Deuteronomy to set up the future leadership to learn from the successes and mistakes of the previous generation. We position our children for success and for failure. So let's read a section from Deuteronomy chapter 31 as Moses talks of his handover. I realised as I came in this morning that even my big Bible had gone home over the last week as I've sort of cleared out the office and things like that. So here's Deuteronomy 31 from my phone, from verse 1. Then Moses went out and spoke these words to all Israel. I'm now 120 years old. I have not got that far yet so far. I'm only just over halfway there. And I'm no longer able to lead you. The Lord has said to me, you shall not cross the Jordan. The Lord your God himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy these nations before you, and you will take possession of their land. Joshua also will cross over ahead of you, as the Lord said. And the Lord will do to them what he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, whom he destroyed along with their land. The Lord will deliver them to you, and you must do to them all that I've commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." So Moses wrote down this law and gave it to the Levitical priests, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. Then Moses commanded them, at the end of every 7 years, in the year for cancelling debts, during the festival of tabernacles, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, you shall read this law before them in their hearing. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the foreigners residing in your towns, so they can listen and learn to fear the Lord your God and follow carefully all the words of this law. Their children, who do not know this law, must hear it and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land you're crossing the Jordan to possess. So there you have Moses talking about his handover. He starts with an analysis of the situation. Verse 2, "I'm now 120 years old, and I'm no longer able to lead you. The Lord has said to me, you shall not cross the Jordan." I think I could lead a bit longer, but God has told me not to. In the summer of 2019, he told me the date and time to hand over to the minute 3 years out. And that was, long before the pandemic hit in and so on. And my top action, priority, is to listen to God's voice and to obey unwaveringly. The main complication for me was, how do I actually handle this sort of, through this transition through a pandemic and so on? And one of the things we had to keep quiet about this for a while. In fact, I told almost nobody, 2 or 3 people, that was it. And the reason was that we didn't want, people connecting it with pandemic or anything else. It wasn't to do with that. It was the fact that, God just said, Tim is ready to take on the leadership, or he's getting close at that point, and it's time for you to hand over. And I had no idea what I was, going to be investing time in next, but I knew that it was, time to hand on. So, I seek to be obedient, whatever. In Moses' case, God caused him to die in order to stop him crossing the Jordan. I hope God doesn't need to do that with me. Yeah. Verse 3, Moses goes on to stress that God will be with them, right? You may have had a change of leader, and you all knew that God was with Moses as the leader before, but Moses wants to stress, look, just because I'm going, that doesn't mean that God's gone, right? That God will lead you. Verse 3, "The Lord your God himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy these nations before you, and you will take possession of their land." And I feel that assurance for this church, that as I hand over, God will lead you. I know that the foundations and the leadership, the foundations are solid and the leadership is good. And there is a good team together. But I also know that there will be a time of adjustment, but then of growth. Moses names his successor. Verse 3, "Joshua also will cross over ahead of you, as the Lord has said." It would have been pretty obvious to everyone there. Joshua had been Moses' assistant from his youth, but it still needed stating and confirming explicitly. God made clear to me that Tim should succeed me a few years back. And over the last couple of years, we've had that confirmed by the elders, the trustees, and the whole church in terms of that recognition of his gifting and calling. So that makes it much easier for me. Right? You're not trying to hand over into a void. You know that you've got the right person lined up to take it on. And you will have success going forward. You will take possession of your land in the way that the Israelites did with the Promised Land. And in the way that we've taken possession of land God has given us. So things like, the premises, the building as a, base. More than 1,000 people over the years coming to a decision to follow Jesus. And you will continue to see God's deliverance as the Israelites did under Joshua. Verse 5, the Lord will deliver them to you, and you must do to them all that I've commanded you. When we moved in here, the debt on this building was about £1.5 million. Shared between all the adults involved at the time, because there were far fewer people involved, that was about £7,000 per adult involved in the church. Okay? Now, that debt's a mere £1,000 per person and reducing by £100 each year. But you will have new and different challenges. I'll come back to that debt in a minute. You too must face them with strength and trust. Right? There was a big degree of having to rely on God to see us through those early days. Verse 6, be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He'll never leave you or forsake you. And it's repeated for emphasis in verses 7 and 8. You need to know that God is with you and will remain with you. Each generation fights different battles. Your battles will be different from the financials ones we had 15 years ago. Yeah? But each generation faces its own giants. Right? So for a bit of perspective, I'm going to tell you one of the ones that my predecessor faced. I am very grateful to Tony for fighting a previous round of battles. When Bill and I joined the eldership something like 28 years ago, 1994, we spent the first 8 months mainly discussing in the elders' meetings 2 things. One was Tony's tax affairs. As the then treasurer had rather overdone it in claiming almost everything as an expense that may or may not have been legitimate. So we had to sort of pull back from some of the, overpressing things. And the other was setting up a new charity trust deed. I commented to Helen after 8 months, Helen, my wife, that I didn't join the eldership to spend my time discussing tax and trust deeds. And it was the prime conversation every month for 8 months, right? But 15 years later, I was so grateful that he had invested that effort. See, the tax was sorted out pretty quickly, okay? But the charity trust deed took a lot longer. The original 1986 trust deed had a clause saying that if the church stopped meeting on the site in New Bradwell, the land would revert to the Assemblies of God. Now, we'd never even been part of the Assemblies of God. The original minister, before Tony's day, had been trained by the Assemblies of God, and he just used their standard trust deed, which had this little clause slipped in saying, thanks, we'll keep the land. Right? It meant we couldn't move location without risk of losing the assets. So Tony came up with a very clever arrangement. He set up a new trust deed with no links to Assemblies of God, and all the church giving shifted to giving to the new trust deed. So all the old trust deed did was just own the land. Then in the late 1990s, we refurbished the old building, and the church gave £300,000 to that refurbishment. But it gave it to the new trust deed. And the new trust deed lent the old trust deed £300,000 with which to refurbish the building. So the old trust deed then has a building, it also has a debt, and is scratching its head as to how to repay the debt. So the old trust deed sold the building for £300,000 to the new one. Right? And with one bound, we were free. 10 years later, when we did move from that building, I was so grateful to Tony for what he did, right? For the efforts made in that generation to set things up for the next generation. That's why I tell you a story that's, sort of long in the past now, but boy, would it have made a difference in terms of our ability to move here, for example. And in the same way, we've tried to set things up for the future here. There's 400,000 of general reserves in the bank, some of which I think you'll find Tim has and team have plans to use, but don't want to spoil what they will announce and talk about next week. There's another £400,000 of giving ready for another building purchase when something suitable becomes available. So actually, we could just use that 800,000 to pay off most of the £1 million debt, that still remains. So, again, there is a freedom that has been enabled for the next generation then to make its own decisions about what God is calling it to. Yeah? You're trying to set things up so they can build on the shoulders of the previous generation. You will build for the next phase, ready to hand on again. So the youth can keep an eye on them, and whether they're doing that well, ready for your generation. Okay? We all build on the shoulders of the previous generation. Just make sure you leave something robust that lasts. We live in an era of sound bites and the triumph of show over substance. But I seek to build something for the long haul that's solid, that will last. I'll pass on the frothy sound bites and the tendency to call everything amazing and awesome. Building something of substance has three parts. And there's a personal application to this, as well as a sort of a church-wide reflection. Okay? Firstly, it needs a robust, dependent relationship with God. Secondly, it's primarily about people. The main thing you invest in is not the finances and so on. It's actually the training, the people. Okay? Robust people, envisioned people, motivated people, action people. But it is also, thirdly, about resources. So things like, this building, reserves, connections, favour in town. Yeah? And I seek to do that each place I work. So I'm going to give you one other example, which is the winter night shelter. There, I intentionally listen to God for strategy. I've spent a lot of time developing volunteers and acquiring resources. So first, a leased building about 5 years ago, and now last year, a building that the winter night shelter owns and we're about to refurbish. Right? It reminds me a bit of what happened in New Bradwell 20-odd years ago. Right? Not that we have a lease to escape there. Okay. The Israelites had the same. They had God behind them. They had people, those 12 tribes, coherent together, going somewhere together, and resources taking over the promised land. And it happened in phases, in steady stages, over a period of time, often a long period of time. It's not instant solutions. And I don't, look back thinking, I need to get everything finished before I hand over or before I die, right? I know that these things have a longevity way beyond my lifetime. My responsibility is for my lifetime. Your responsibility is for your lifetime. And then others will lead beyond that. Every time you see a medieval cathedral, you see that soaring scale and size, and particularly enormous for what they were able to do in those days, and the intimacy of the detail. But behind that is a multi-generational effort. Every one of those buildings took at least I was just wondering what they put up from this one. Right? Every one took at least decades to finish. Lincoln Cathedral, 20 years. Durham and Salisbury Cathedral, 40 years. Norwich Cathedral, 50 years. Hereford, 60 years. And some took hundreds. Lichfield, 145 years. Worcester, 290 years. Canterbury, 350 years. Winchester, 450 years. Helen and I have sought to do the same on a rather smaller scale. Okay. For 4 decades now. The key is delayed gratification. We don't spend all our resources and effort on sort of holidays and travel and meals out and things like that. we build a base for relationship with God and a network of trusted people, and we invest in people. So we've acquired, at the personal level, because I want some personal application to this, we've acquired assets which enable us to be flexible and generous. We have a holiday cottage, which 3 or 4 sets of you have used this summer. We have spare rooms in the house now that the kids have moved on. Helen wanted to downsize. I resisted that. She kindly said we can stay put for a while. So we have so many spare rooms that we have a whole family who's now staying with us for 3 months whilst they find somewhere longer to live. And for the future, I'm going to do it again with New Frontiers, our global family. I'm in northern Cyprus next month with 170 of the emerging, or about 140 of the emerging leaders, and about 30 of the current established leaders. And I'll continue to invest in people as long as they're interested and I have breath. So what's your personal equivalent? How are you investing your efforts? In your relationship with God? In building connection and relationships? In demonstrating effort and commitment and resilience? In gathering resources? How are you training the next generation in your life? Verses 12 and 13 say, assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the foreigners residing in your towns, so they can listen and learn to fear the Lord your God and follow carefully all the words of this law. Their children who do not know this law must hear it and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land you're crossing the Jordan to possess. So it tells them to assemble the people. You gather, right? You connect. You spend time. You engage them. Then it says so they can listen and learn. You have purpose behind gathering. I always remember one couple sitting here in the church who said, I said, I just want to come around and visit you. And they said, okay, what do you want to talk about? Oh, just want to chat. Right. And I said, and they let it go at that point. And I went round and actually I was asking him to join the eldership. And as soon as I asked him, they said, you see, we knew that Richard never does anything without a purpose. Right? My purpose may simply be, if you get invited round for a meal, don't assume I'm, got something to dump, on you. Right? My purpose may be that I just want to build relationship. In fact, I will go on down a rabbit trail with this one. When I was at university, I was on the committee of the Christian Union, and I was told the people joining this committee for the coming years, there were 8 of us, and 6 of them I knew, and 1 of them I didn't, right? And it was this girl from another college that I thought, right, I will get to know her, right? I didn't have any other motive, though within a year we were going out and we've been married nearly 40, right? So, yes, but, I was, right, okay, I don't know that Helen, I will get to know her, right? If we're going to work together, I will get to know her. So I invited her around for a meal. Not at that point we had any interest in each other. Indeed, she couldn't stand me. I think she thought I was a bit immature. She was right. Anyway, enough of the digression. Where were we? Oh, yes. So they can listen and learn. You see, they connect. I connected. That was the aim. Right, it worked. Yeah. So, so for the youth, just be intentional, right? And you can have, good motivation. You're just there to get to know people, Well, if something else happens, fine, So. Anyway, yeah. Their children, verse 13, who do not know this law must hear it. Don't expect them simply to absorb it. Be intentional. Right? I am really intentional with my grandchildren. They're 4 and 2, but we read them Bible stories, we explain things to them, we talk it through with them. Explain and train. Explain and train. Don't assume they'll pick it up by osmosis, right? So what are you investing in? Fun and frivolity? New and more experience? Feeling good about yourself? Or training and discipling and deepening the next generation? Because that's the only thing that will give you a legacy that will last. Maybe you feel you're just surviving. Well, I understand, but intentionally invest in people as well. And by the way, for those who think, yeah, I've really tried, but, they just object, right? The people are not being responsive. At the end of the day, people do recognize the good intentions and the investment. So, they may be rude back to you and not very nice. In fact, I had a phase of that from age 22 to 24. I was really not very nice at all to my parents. I left home and I was really very rude to them. And I said at 24, I apologized to them. I said, I'm sorry, I just needed space. But I didn't need to be rude and nasty with it, right? And, they went through 2 years of doing their best in terms of relationship with me, and I was just not very nice. Well, no, I was worse than that. I was awful in terms of reaction with them, right? But, but they just kept going. And, I did recognize it. I knew it was me. I ended up saying, it's not you, it's me. I knew it was me, and I am sorry. Yeah? So just keep, if you're finding you're struggling with that, just keep doing the right thing. What are the giants you're addressing? Common in this generation in the UK are emotional health and lack of resilience, independence when it should be interdependence, a victim mentality and failure to take responsibility, especially, I'm afraid, in the under 40s. Yeah, I think that's a real stronghold for you. You equip at any age. One of the most powerful things I ever saw in my 19 years leading the church was a picture of a sound desk of a church in Singapore. And this church had an average age of 22, the whole church, and there were about 5,000 people. Okay? And the sound desk was run by the 19-year-old. It was a rear shot of 3 people in a line. And the 19-year-old was training the 14-year-old to run the sound desk because he was going to be next up to run it. But here was the thing that was really impressive. And so this is the one for you, all the youth here now, okay? So there's a 19-year-old, there's the 14-year-old, and then there's a 10-year-old. But here's the really impressive thing. I would have thought in terms of the 10-year-old standing the other side of the 19-year-old, and the 19-year-old explains to both of them. That is not what was happening. The 19-year-old explained to the 14-year-old. The 14-year-old explained to the 10-year-old. If you are going to explain on to the next one, you have to understand it. The 14-year-old had to really get it in order to be able to explain to the 10-year-old. So if you're youth age and you're thinking, yeah, I'm just on the receiving end of training and education, I want you to start thinking about being on the giving out end. You may only be 13 or 14 now, but start training the 10-year-olds. Start looking out for them and going on to the next stage. Right? And that is how you will see real engagement and transformation and people learning well and properly. So identify your giants and slay them. Pray. Ask for advice. Build new habits. Be intentional. Before I finish, so I'm going to do 2 more things. I want to thank a few people. First of all of you, thank you for working with me, tolerating me, despite my tactlessness at times, over aggression and over challenging, confront things a bit too quickly and a bit too readily. Thank you to the many people who've been trustees down the years for keeping things on course behind the scenes. You don't see or hear much of that, but it does happen quietly. Thank you for the elders who've kept things safe, and especially Bill. Thank you, Bill, who's been around with me a decade longer than almost anybody else. Thank you, Johan, for taking on the pastoral leadership in recent times. Thank you, Donna, for taking so much of the frontline leadership and cultural shaping of things like the night shelter. Thank you, Jackie, for providing so much unflagging personal support and catching so many balls that I was in danger of dropping. In fact, I realised I got a bit blasé about those things because I thought, oh, that might be, I don't have to reach out and catch that one. Jackie will get that one. So, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Where is Sharon? Where is she? Oh, what are you doing in the back row? You're never in the back row. Anyway, thank you, Sharon, for taking so much of the organising burden off me in so many different arenas down the years. In fact, she's organising that conference in Northern Cyprus at the end of next month. So, some of these things just transfer to the new worlds we work in. Thank you, Dave, the front row here, for the pastoral care you provide, which I strongly recognise has been crucial to our growth, as I'm not very pastorally sensitive and tended to solve most problems by calling, Dave, can you bail me out of this one, please? Thank you, Tim, for growing in leadership so that I had someone capable to hand on to. Thank you, Maggie, for supporting him, keeping him on course. And thank you for Helen for telling me whenever I needed it to, and these are my words, my tactless words, not Helen's, basically, stop whinging and get a life. She always said it a lot more nicely than that, but I recognise that's what fundamentally she was saying. In Deuteronomy 33, Moses goes on to bless people before his departure. So I'm going to finish with a series of blessings for the church. Hey, young man of the next generation but one, will you come and join me? I know you're not normally allowed on the stage. Do you want to come? Do you want to come? Come on. This, for anybody who doesn't know, is my grandson, who's wary because he knows he can wander around the building, but he's not allowed on the stage. So first of all, I want to bless the whole church. Will you all stand, please? The Lord bless you as you walk humbly with him. The Lord keep you as you look to him for your security and safety. The Lord lead you into his presence as you seek him. The Lord let the light of his countenance shine upon you and inspire you. The Lord bless you as you give extravagantly to others. The Lord help you to be producers rather than consumers. The Lord make you soft-hearted as you obey him. The Lord teach you not to take offense at others. The Lord strengthen you to walk upright as an heir of the King of Kings, knowing your identity as an heir, a child of the living God. The Lord give you ears that hear, discernment and understanding. And finally, the Lord bless you with hearts of flesh and not of stone, that are willing to love and to obey. Amen. Would the adults sit, but the youth remain standing? I want to pray a blessing over you as well. You can define youth whatever you like. Okay. The Lord enable you to stand on the shoulders of the previous generation. In fact, can everybody else just hold out your hands towards the youth and let's just do this together, because we're in this together. The Lord make you ready to accept others. Not to build little cliques and so on, but to accept everyone. The Lord help you to forgive others. The Lord train you for the fight that is coming and the whirlwind that will surround each of your lives at some point as you fight it out for what you believe and what you will do and follow. The Lord enable you to find others to equip, encourage, and strengthen as you act like in that illustration, the 14-year-old training the 10-year-old. Whether you're already 18, look for the next generation on to train and equip. Amen. You can sit down. Okay, if you have any leadership role in this church, anything, or aspire to develop as a leader, I'd like to stand, please. Don't be bashful. Right. I'm going to ask some people to stand if they're not already. I've now got a mental block as to your names. The 3 young men over there. No, don't look behind you. That is what I did in my 3rd week in the church. Dave Devenish came on stage and prophesied over me about having a heart of gold. And he looked at me, and I looked behind me and realised there wasn't anybody behind me. The same for you 3. Ed, Faye, Andrew, please stand. Becca Abbott, you are sat, you should be standing. Becca Hammett, you are still seated, you should be standing. If you are in any doubt, you stand. Matt, you are leading in the world of worship. Stand up. There are others, but you just have to make the decision yourself. Okay. The Lord bless you with courage for the fight. The Lord give you the humility to learn from your mistakes. In fact, that one is one I feel I can impart. I think I have been good on the humility. I've definitely had plenty of mistakes to learn from. So, Father, I just pass that on, that ability to learn from the mistakes and to look at it and to do something different the next time. Lord, equip you with the gifting necessary for your roles. The Lord make you resilient to keep going through everything. The Lord enable you to stand against cultural norms where they conflict with God's direction for you. The Lord strengthen you through knocks and the buffets of leadership. The Lord bless you as you lead to advance God's kingdom. And I want to pray that for you specifically, Mariah. I know what God's calling you to. And I pray that he will enable you to stand firm in the turmoil that will surround what you seek to do. Yeah, amen.